HQ presented by Penske. This is the SEC Game of the Week, 3:30 Eastern Time on CBS. Number 1, Georgia against the Auburn Tigers. First time Georgia is leaving Athens. First road game of the season. And to break it down, we have the one and only Brady Quinn. Okay. Auburn did not look good last week.
They did not.
But
no.
Georgia, you know, we talk about the weak schedule that they have. This has to be their toughest test of the season to date, right? To date,
yeah, you can make that case. I think the tough thing is for Auburn is there's just a mismatch up front. We saw that last week versus Texas A&M. They couldn't match up with the defensive front for Texas A&M. And honestly, the Aggies may have the best defensive front right now in the SEC. I think Georgia would like to make claim to that, and that's where there's a mismatch in this one. So that, amongst the fact that you saw Auburn, play 3 quarterbacks. Peyton Thorne started the game, had 2 others in there, but they were sacked 7 times in last week's game. There's 15 tackles for loss. This Georgia defense has to be licking its chops with the opportunity to create negative plays and put their offense in advantageous positions. So the reality is Georgia's only giving up about 87 yards on the ground right now. I don't think Auburn's going to be able to run the football. They're only 11 points per game. I think the defense is going to take care of business, and Carson Beck is going to have a big day.
What do we know about this iteration of the Georgia Bulldogs to this point in the season? Because their toughest game to date has been a home game against South Carolina.
Yeah, I think the one thing I can tell you is Carson Beck provides them a different element at the quarterback position. He's got an NFL caliber arm, and you're looking at him as a potential prospect in the future of being a first-round prospect that like we're looking at. He gives off that sort of play from the pocket and even the playmaking ability that he has. Now, the one thing that's really interesting about this team, and not many teams try to play man coverage against them, but when they do, you got to cover the left side of the field. That's the only spot where Carson Beck and this offense throws right now. I am not exactly sure why. I assume it's because you like your isolated matchup on that left-hand side of the formation, but you go look at the throw chart. It's one of the most bizarre scenarios that I've seen where it's a tell or a tendency of a team right now. So we'll see how much Auburn wants to play man-to-man coverage, but you know where the ball is going if they do. But Beck, I think, gives them a shot at being in that conversation of playing for a national championship. Not to say that they're depleted on defense, but year after year, when you lose all these first-round picks on defense, it's hard to replace that. Well, now they've got an offense that I think can share in the burden of lifting up this team each week.
Only using one side of the field in the passing game. Auburn would like to use like any part of the field because last week they had just over 50 passing yards.
56 combined yards amongst all 3 quarterbacks.
Oh, my gosh. So when you have that kind of performance and now you're playing the 2-time defending national champs in that defense, what can you do in 1 week to get ready for it?
Well, you can't give them any sort of extra momentum. And so you can't turn the football over. No pre-snap penalties. Allow your crowd and the environment to be that 12th man and be able to put pressure on Georgia. So whether it's eliminating the negative plays like we saw last week with 15 of those, or even the turnovers, just give yourself a chance to keep this thing close. At the end of the game, maybe you can pull one out. But I'd love to see Auburn, too, just go with one quarterback. And whether it's Peyton Thorne or whoever else you want to throw to, give them the entire game to prove themselves and get into a rhythm, whether or not they can be your guy.
All right, the line is 14.5, which is low for a Georgia game over the last several years. Definitely their tightest spread of the season. The total is sitting at 46.5, which is very low. Which side are you on?
I'd lay the 14.5 points here. I just think there's too big of a mismatch up front in the trenches. I actually like the over, too. I think Georgia should be able to put up a pretty big number here. I think you might get a little action from Auburn, too, towards the end of the game. But bet that over and then lay the points with Georgia. Don't worry about the hook.
Okay, so you like the Bulldogs, even though this season they are 0-3-1 against the spread. Georgia at Auburn. SEC Game of the Week. Our Josh Pate is going to be there with the Late Kick podcast as well. Number 1 against the Auburn Tigers. Jordan Hare always gets up for these kind of games. 3:30 Eastern, CBS, and streaming on Paramount+.